In stories about old houses and important documents, it's often said that the attic holds the greatest secrets. For me, that phrase had never made more sense than on that Christmas day when I climbed the creaking stairs of our Victorian home in search of the old holiday decorations. I had noticed something different about my parents since I arrived. Their smiles felt forced, their gazes shifted whenever I mentioned future plans for the house. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found among the dusty boxes in the attic. A brown envelope, half hidden under a pile of family albums. Inside, a document that would change everything. A sales contract for our house, signed 2 weeks earlier. The house where I grew up, where every floorboard told a story, where every mark on the wall held meaning, sold without me even knowing. My hands trembled as I read the details. $850,000. A ridiculously low price for a Victorian property in Connecticut, especially one so well preserved. But it was the fate of the money that made my stomach churn. A direct transfer to my brother Blake's account. "Skylar?" My mother's voice echoed up the attic stairs. "What are you doing up there?" I walked down the stairs holding the envelope, my heavy steps echoing through the old wood. In the living room, I found my parents and Blake, all gathered around the Christmas tree. The same tree we had decorated together every year for as long as I could remember. "When were you planning to tell me?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. The silence that followed was deafening. Blake stared at the floor as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. My father adjusted his glasses nervously. It was my mother who finally spoke. "Your brother needed the money more, sweetheart. You already have your life set up. Your career." Those words, spoken so casually, felt like knives. 28 years, of memories, of stories, of shared moments, all reduced to a simple financial transaction to bail Blake out of yet another failure. "Blake needs a chance to start over," my father added, as if selling our house was as simple as trading in a car. His last business venture had some setbacks. Setbacks. What a convenient word to describe how my brother had lost $500,000 trying to start a gourmet food truck chain. Before that, it had been CrossFit gyms, a sportswear brand, and even a cat food delivery startup. Each new failure was treated as a valuable learning experience. "And what about my memories?" I asked, holding one of the Christmas ornaments I had made in 3rd grade. "What about Grandma's room, the one she asked us to keep just as it was? The Victorian furniture that has been in our family for generations?" Blake finally lifted his eyes from the floor. "We can buy new furniture, Skylar. Even better ones." Typical of him, always thinking everything could be replaced with something newer and shinier, as if the value of a century-old home could be measured only in dollars. "The new owners are giving us 30 days to move out," my mother informed me softly. "I've already started packing a few things. I was thinking of having a garage sale." "Garage sale?" I interrupted. "With the family antiques? With the pieces Grandma spent her life collecting?" "They're just old things, Sky," Blake shrugged. "Besides, with the money from the sale, I can finally invest in that franchise I researched. It's practically guaranteed that—" I raised my hand, stopping him. I didn't want to hear about another one of his foolproof plans. I walked over to the living room window, the one with the Art Nouveau stained glass that had always fascinated visitors. How many mornings had I spent there, watching the colors dance across the floor as the sunlight streamed through the colored glass? "Where are you going to live?" I asked, still facing away from them. "We found an apartment to rent," my father answered. "It's small, but—" "And when were you going to tell me? On moving day?" The silence that followed was answer enough. I spent the night researching, using my contacts in the architecture field. I discovered that the house had been sold to Vertex Development Group, a new company in the market, known for buying historic properties at low prices. I accessed their website, and my heart stopped. A luxury condo project planned for our neighborhood. They were going to demolish everything. The next morning, I returned to the house, determined to understand how my parents had agreed to this. In my father's office, while he was at work, I found more documents. The truth was worse than I had imagined. Blake hadn't just had a few setbacks. He owed money to dangerous people. His franchises were elaborate pyramid schemes. The money from the house sale wasn't for a fresh start. It was to cover a financial hole he had been digging for years. Looking for something? Blake's voice startled me. He was standing at the door, an odd smile on his face. Why didn't you tell the truth about the debts? Because you would have tried to stop me, he replied casually. Always the responsible sister, always trying to fix everything. This house isn't just yours to sell, Blake. It's generations of history. History doesn't pay bills, Sky. Or do you think the guys I owe will accept an Art Nouveau stained glass window as payment? At that moment, I realized I wasn't talking to the boy who had shared my childhood anymore. The person in front of me was a stranger, someone who saw our family's heritage as nothing more than a quick escape. How much time do we really have before demolition starts? I asked. 2 weeks, he said, checking his brand new phone. Apparently, the money was already being put to good use. Vertex wants to start construction by the end of the month. And do our parents know about the demolition? His silence was revealing. Of course they didn't. Blake hadn't just sold the house. He had also sold them the illusion that it would be preserved by its new owners. The next day, the sun had barely risen when I knocked on the door of Robert Chen's office, the local historian I knew from a few restoration projects. Skylar, do you have any idea what you've just discovered? He asked, examining the old photos of the house I had brought. This isn't just another Victorian home. This is the Thompson mansion. Thompson? As in the family that founded the town? Exactly. Your house was built in 1886 by Samuel Thompson, one of Connecticut's pioneers. The stained glass window in the living room? It was a gift from a French family who stayed there during World War I. My heart pounded. That house wasn't just our history. It was part of the town's history itself. And there's more, Robert continued, pulling a dusty book from his shelf. See these markings on the staircase railing? These are symbols from the abolitionist movement. Your house was likely part of the Underground Railroad. For hours, we immersed ourselves in historical records, old documents, and photographs. Each discovery felt like a new weapon in our arsenal. Vertex can't just demolish a place like this, I argued. They can, unless we manage to get it designated as a historical landmark, Robert explained. But the process is complicated. We need solid documentation, community testimonies, and, most importantly, time. How much time? Normally? Months. But with demolition scheduled in 2 weeks. Then we'll do it in 2 weeks, I interrupted, already mentally planning my next steps. I'll use my savings to hire a research team. I need every document, every photo, every piece of evidence that proves this house's historical value. Skylar, this is going to cost a fortune. I don't care. That house is worth more than money. And when my parents find out Blake lied about the demolition, they don't know? No. And that's why we have to move fast. Blake sold the house for half its actual value, hid the truth about the demolition, and I stopped talking when my phone vibrated. It was a message from Blake. I know what you're doing. Stop now or I'll tell Mom and Dad about that summer in Paris. That message froze me for a moment. Paris. The summer that changed everything. The secret I had kept. From my parents for a decade. You okay? Robert asked, noticing my shift in expression. Yeah, just family complications. I put my phone away, trying to stay focused. Let's keep going. But as we worked through the historical documents, my mind kept drifting back to Paris. That summer, while my parents thought I was doing an architecture internship, I was actually restoring an old villa on the outskirts of the city. The money I earned, practically a fortune for a college student, didn't go into savings as they believed. It went to pay off Blake's first debts after he lost his college funds to gambling. My phone vibrated again. Blake, imagine how they'd react if they knew you lied. That the perfect daughter has secrets too. I replied, go ahead, tell them. At least my lie was to help you. Oh, really? And what about the real reason you're so desperate to save the house? It's not about that safe behind the office panel, is it? My blood ran cold. The safe. How did he know? What is he talking about? Robert asked, noticing my agitation. I have to go, I said, hurriedly gathering my things. Keep working on the research. I'll be back tomorrow. I drove to the house as if the devil were chasing me. The safe behind the panel was a secret only Grandma and I knew. She had shown it to me weeks before she passed away, making me swear I'd only open it if it was truly necessary. I found Blake, in the office, already prying the wooden panel off. The scent of old dust and aged wood filled the air as he worked, destroying decades of history with each careless movement. How did you find out? You weren't the only one paying attention. To Grandma, he said, his fingers feeling along the wall. She told me about the safe, too. Unlike you, I didn't wait so long to check it out. What do you want, Blake? I want you to drop this historical landmark nonsense. Vertex already paid me a hefty advance. If they back out of the deal, you lose the money to pay off your debts, I finished for him. But then what? When you burn through that money too? What will you sell next? You're always so smug, he scoffed. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about money. It's about finally stepping out of your shadow. The perfect daughter, the successful architect, the guardian of family traditions. The panel finally gave way, revealing the small, built-in safe. Even in the dim light of the office, I could see that the door had already been tampered with, clear tool marks around the lock. Did Grandma leave you the combination? I didn't need it. I broke it open last week. My heart sank. What did you find? Nothing you don't already know. The original house deeds, some family jewelry, old letters. But there was something interesting. He pulled a yellowed envelope from his pocket. A letter from Grandma. To you. Give me that. First, cancel your plans with the historian. Let Vertex do what they need to do. Or this letter, along with the truth about Paris, will end up in our parents' hands. I'm sure they'd love to know what their perfect daughter is really like. You wouldn't do that. Wouldn't I? He opened the envelope, beginning to read. Dear Skylar, if you're reading this, it means the moment I feared has finally arrived. Stop! I lunged to grab the letter, but he was faster. Oh, this part is particularly interesting, he continued, skipping a few paragraphs. The true value of this house isn't in the walls or the furniture. It's in what I hid for you in the... At that moment, we heard footsteps in the hallway. Our parents had arrived home early. Blake hastily folded the letter and tucked it into the inner pocket of his blazer. Think carefully, little sis, he whispered. You have until tomorrow to decide. The house or the truth. I watched him walk out of the office, greeting our parents with his best performance of a devoted son. I stayed behind, staring at the broken safe, feeling the weight of generations of family secrets on my shoulders. Had Grandma hidden something that important? And why was Blake, who had always despised anything related to our family's history, so interested now? Something didn't add up. And I had less than 24 hours to figure out what it was. I spent the entire night sifting through my memories of Grandma. Every conversation, every story she had told me about the house. There was something I was missing. Why had she shown me the safe weeks before she died? Why make me promise to only open it when absolutely necessary? Then I remembered. The red notebook. Every night before bed, Grandma wrote in a small red notebook. It's my mystery journal, she would say with a wink. As a child, I thought it was just a joke. But now, I climbed up to her old bedroom, still untouched since she passed. At the bottom of the last drawer in the Victorian dresser, wrapped in a silk handkerchief, was the notebook. The yellowed pages revealed much more than the memories of an old woman. They were meticulous records, dates, names, precise locations within the house. In the final entry, written in shaky handwriting, I found what I was looking for. To my dear Skylar, if you are reading this, then Blake has likely found the safe. He was always too clever for his own good, but what he's looking for isn't there. The true treasure of the Thompson family is where it all began, in the place that only a true guardian of this house would know. My heart pounded. The place where it all began, the cellar. Samuel Thompson, the house's original builder, had been an obsessive collector of rare wines. The cellar was his pride, with imported stone walls and a revolutionary ventilation system for its time. I descended the cellar stairs with a flashlight, my footsteps echoing against the century-old stones. At the far end, behind what seemed like an ordinary shelf, there was a faint marking on the wall. The Thompson family symbol, nearly invisible after so many decades. I pressed the stone and heard a soft click. A hidden compartment opened, revealing a carved wooden box. Inside, I found not just old documents but something that made my breath catch. The original blueprints of the house, with notes detailing secret passages, and the sound of footsteps on the stairs made me spin around. Blake stood there, a triumphant expression on his face. "So Grandma told you too." "Stay back," I warned, gripping the box tightly. "You have no idea what I just found." "Oh, but I do," Blake said, stepping down the last few stairs. "The original blueprints of the house, showing all the secret passages, including the one Samuel Thompson used to hide the family's gold during the Great Depression." So that was it. It wasn't just about selling the house. Blake had been searching for the Thompson family's lost treasure. "How did you find out?" "Remember that story Grandma always told? About how the Thompson family survived the crash of 1929 when all the banks collapsed?" I started digging. Samuel Thompson converted his entire fortune into gold before the crash. Gold that was never found. He took another step toward me. "Vertex doesn't want the house to build a condo. They're a front for professional treasure hunters. The deal was they'd give me a cut if I secured the house for them." "And our parents?" "They don't know a thing. They really believe I sold the house to start fresh." He laughed. "But with the Thompson gold, I could have dozens of fresh starts." I carefully unfolded the blueprints. The notes were clear, a network of tunnels beneath the house, connecting strategic points. But there was something more, a handwritten message from our grandmother. "The true treasure is not what's hidden, but what is in plain sight." "Let me see that." Blake lunged, trying to grab the blueprints. "No!" I stepped back, shielding the documents. "Grandma left this for me for a reason. She knew you only cared about money while I—" A noise from above made us freeze. Footsteps, voices. "Federal police. Everyone stay where you are." Blake's face went pale. "No, they weren't supposed to come today." "Who?" "Vertex. They said they'd handle the legal side later." Flashlight. Beams lit up the cellar stairs. It was time for the truth to come out. "Skylar Thompson?" A voice called from the top of the stairs. "Agent Melissa Carter, FBI. We need you to come up with your hands visible." Blake panicked. "You called the FBI?" "No," I replied, starting to understand. "But I think Grandma did." We climbed the stairs slowly, and I was still holding the box with the documents. In the kitchen, we found not only federal agents, but also Robert Chen, the historian, and an elderly woman I recognized from old family photos, Margaret Thompson, the last living descendant of the house's original builder. "Miss Thompson," Robert spoke, "your grandmother contacted us 6 months ago. She knew something like this could happen." Margaret stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the box in my hands. "Eleanor, your grandmother was my best friend. She came to me when she found out Blake was investigating the legend of the gold. There is no gold, is there? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The true treasure is not what is hidden, Margaret quoted, but what is in plain sight. She opened the box I was holding and pulled out the blueprints. These secret passages? They were part of the Underground Railroad. Samuel Thompson didn't use his fortune to buy gold. He used it to help fugitive slaves reach freedom. The treasure he was protecting was human lives. Blake let out a hysterical laugh. So there was never any gold? All this time? Vertex Development, Agent Carter interjected, is a criminal organization known for looting historical properties. We've been tracking them for months. Your attempt to sell the house gave us the opening we needed. What about my parents? I asked. The sale? It's illegal, Robert explained. The house has been a protected historical landmark since yesterday. Your grandmother started the process months ago. I just finished what she began. Margaret took my hand. Eleanor always said you were the true guardian of this house. Now I understand why. 6 months have passed since that night in the cellar. The Thompson House, as it is now officially known, has become one of Connecticut's most important historical landmarks. Blake's old room was turned into a museum dedicated to the Underground Railroad, telling stories of courage and freedom that our walls once witnessed. Blake is doing community service and undergoing therapy, part of a plea deal since he cooperated with the investigation into Vertex. For the first time in his life, he's actually working, helping to restore historic homes. Whether it's irony or fate, he's discovered he has a talent for it. It took time for my parents to process everything, the shame of having been manipulated, the guilt of nearly allowing so much history to be destroyed. But little by little, we're rebuilding our relationship, just as we've restored every corner of this house. Margaret Thompson has become a constant presence here. Her stories about the family have breathed new life into these old hallways. The stained glass window in the living room, which once fascinated visitors, now has a plaque explaining its role as a signal for fugitive slaves. The colors indicated when it was safe to enter, and Grandma's letter, the one Blake used to blackmail me. He finally gave it back. In it, she didn't reveal any dark secrets, only her final wish, that the house would continue to be a place of refuge and hope, as it always had been. The safe behind the panel has been restored. Inside, I keep not only the historical documents, but also Grandma's red notebook. Her stories are now shared with every visitor who walks through these doors. On the last page of the notebook, I found a message I had never noticed before. Dear Skylar, sometimes we need to lose something to truly understand its value, but other times, we must fight to keep others from losing it for us. You have always been stronger than you think. With love, Grandma. Today, when I lead guided tours through the house, I tell not just the story of the Thompsons, but also our own, a story of family, redemption, and the true meaning of heritage. Blake was right about one thing. There was a hidden treasure in this house, but it wasn't gold. It was something far more valuable, the truth about who we are and what we choose to protect. And as for Paris? Well, that's secret. I think I'll save for another story.